until we found one spot, but a beautiful spot. What a lovely day. And it's good to have you back on, Indy. Like you said, it's been a while, so long. I've gone completely grey, apart from the odd black streaks here and there. But yeah, it's been a long, long time, and a lot's changed for you, I know. And you're a married man now, as many people may know. And I called that one. Remember, I called that.
You did actually. You were the first one, and I think one of the early ones to call it, or who had picked up on it actually pretty early on. So I was very, very impressed.
Yeah. I didn't pick up on anything. It wasn't that. I just thought it would work, and I'm not Nostradamus or anything like that. But for somehow I just thought, yeah, they'll make a cool couple, and I was right. And
the Punjabi still are black.
The Punjabi still are black. But yeah, it's great news. Congratulations, obviously. It's been a while now. And I've seen your trips. You had probably the longest honeymoon I've known anyone to take, a whole year. So that was interesting times for you, obviously.
It was, you know what, it was a pretty crazy period. Me and Jaspreet were thinking about, we were talking about getting married and what that would look like. We had immediately were like, you know what, number one on our list actually is to travel the world, and number two is really to spend that time together. That's the reason why we want to do that. So we love that adventure, and it's an opportunity to spend that quality time together. Although a lot of other married couples were like, "Are you crazy? Like, we're not sure you'll last a full 12 months sort of spending 24/7 together." But here we are. Things are great. So I'm very, very glad and very, very grateful.
Yeah. It's always nice for friends to send you off on positive vibes, to say...
They had a lot of faith in me, right? And they have a lot of faith in us.
But, the reason I bring it up, because obviously you went to some fantastic countries, and, we're currently in lockdown now. Who knows when we'll be able to do something like that, and all the people around the world, will air travel be the same, or will it change? I've got a feeling it's probably going to change, and there's going to be a lot more restrictions on movement, not just going abroad, but even in cities in the UK and towns. We could have potentially COVID hotspots. So that town or city could be a COVID hotspot, and you could be kind of banned from going in there or need a particular reason. It's going to affect a lot of commerce and economics, which so happens you're an expert at. So how do you see the future of businesses and travel going forward?
So that's a really interesting question. And obviously this is my opinion, but I think, and the conversations we're having with governments and with so many business industries comes down to business purpose. And, how are we supporting everyone around us when we're talking about business, not just our shareholders and profitability, but how are we supporting communities? How are we supporting our employees? How are we supporting national government? So I guess I'll to this kind of narrative, which has been ongoing over the last 2 decades, the last 10, 20 years, but it's really been accelerated because of COVID-19. Because if you think about the underlying reason as to why COVID-19 has occurred and this virus has spread the way it has, is just because the way we as a society and our economic system and the way we as people are operating at the moment in terms of, consumption, constant use of natural resources around us without much regard as to the long-term sustainability of that and the viability of that. And so that's really driven this current situation, and people are starting to realize that, and businesses are starting to realize that actually there's a much greater social piece to why we're in existence. It's not just about profitability. It's about how we operate within our environment, how we support our communities that operate around us. Because if we're degrading all of that around us, then quite frankly, there'll be no business, in 10 years. There won't be any society, let alone businesses in, 10, 20, 30 years. So a lot of people are starting to wake up to the fact that, how can we operate in a more sustainable way? and how can we support people around us, and businesses are starting to live to that. So you're starting to see it already with response to COVID-19 and how organizations have been sort of supporting the pandemic. So really, like a really amazing story. And there's many of these. You look at companies like Brewdog.
Okay, I'm back.
We're back to where we began.
We are indeed. We tried being outside. It just, I didn't think about the technical situation in terms of Wi-Fi. So that's my bad on that one.
That's okay. It's like a beautiful love story. We've ended up where we began, Indy.
We've gone full circle.
Yeah. We ventured outside and it didn't work, but we persevered, like all great love stories, and here we are. But yeah, catching up where what I was talking about, I don't think I can remember. We were talking about businesses and how they're going to adapt and how the future potentially could look.
And supply chains moving back to those countries. So I think that will happen. It won't be, as I was saying before, it won't be the extremes of what we're seeing in the news. So this is the end of globalization and everything's going to be, national supply chains, etc. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think a lot of businesses and government, what is key infrastructure that has to stay local, stay national, so that if we ever come under any kind of threat, like similar to this again, that we'll be prepared for that.
I mean, I've read somewhere that there's potentially millions of viruses out there, and it just takes that one, obviously, to mutate and jump from animals and onto humans. And, that mutation is what the scientists are struggling with and how that happens. I don't think they're completely sure why and how that happens. And if you look at some areas and in our part, our globalization of the world, we encroaching onto wildlife areas where animals have lived for millions of years, and then suddenly humans have turned up. We're talking about rainforests being destroyed, and the overconsumption of meats and animals. This probably all has a bearing factor on where we've come. And I think for environmentalists, at least, I think we need to know as humans that, we're kind of renting our place on this earth. We don't own it. And I think hopefully some attitudes and perceptions on how we are living will change. I don't know. What do you think?
That's exactly that. And that goes back to the point of sort of business purpose. So like before, businesses and societies at whole is just making decisions based on monetary. So we're selling, we're creating product for X, we're selling it for Y, and Z is our profit. But they're not considering actually, are our operations impacting the environment in a negative way? If we keep doing this, will we not be able to create anything ever again, for example? So you're seeing some cities, a really interesting one in the Netherlands, for example, they're adopting what's called the donut model, which is effectively looking at, business, looking at the economy, looking at the environment, and looking at community, saying, look, everything has a ceiling in terms of its capacity, and to make sure that we're not encroaching on that, so the environment can still grow and thrive. We can use that natural capital, so the environment around us, for our benefit, but we're not degrading it in the process. And that's similar for communities as well. So people are thriving, they're being productive at work, they're contributing to society, but we're not doing it at the expense of their well-being, their long-term physical health as well. So it's kind of bringing that into decision making, which I think will be the biggest shift for a lot of people. And then at an individual level, it's actually sort of being a true materialistic person. And when I say a true materialistic person, I mean someone that when they're buying something and they're consuming something, they're really considering like what toll has this taken on the environment, on the planet around us. So, for example, the whole industry of disposable fashion, where you wear one piece, you wear a dress or you wear a suit or a shirt once, and you don't wear it again because you're worried about what people think about you, which from an environmental point of view or a materialistic point of view is ridiculous, because that garment or that thing that you bought took a toll on the environment, and you wore it once. and then it's going to go into landfill. That sounds crazy, right? So I think the attitudes in society is really going to change, and especially for the younger demographic, who will look at some of these things that we're doing currently in society and think, this is absolutely crazy.
And we're getting a little bit of that, just before COVID-19. You had people like Greta Thunberg, who is that young demographic, and looked around and saw these politicians and the way we're operating in society and thought, this just seems wrong. And, just talking about Greta, the kind of abuse she gets, and you've got to remember she's a young girl, younger than me at least. I'm 44. She's what, 20? Is she 18, 9, something like that?
Around that mark.
Yeah, around that mark, right? And she's not saying anything horrible to anyone. She's just saying, look, let's look after the world a little bit more and sort of consider other things rather than money. Mm-hmm. And she just gets pillared from these old men, basically. But she seems to have she does have a massive following, especially the younger generation who see her as a sort of an icon. And there is a shift towards that, I'm sure, from that younger generation, but the problem being, you can have these movements a bit like the Wall Street protests. The problem is you need the people up in higher positions of power to make the moves and to take the actions and put legislation in. That's where real movement, I think, takes place. But I mean, opinions can be changed from these governments if there's a swell of people. It goes back to like the peasants' revolt back in history. We've ended up like that. It was only until the peasants revolted that the landowners had to do something. We're still bloody doing the same thing.
But I guess that's just with any system change, right? Like influence, and people think, what can one person do? But you see from Greta, you think for so many other activists, you can make a difference because people start to rally around that thought process. And no doubt, the old guard or whatever you want to call them will feel threatened by that because you are fundamentally putting forward a viewpoint that is very different to the way they're currently thinking. But you have to remember this is how change happens, right? So at the moment, you've got this huge group of millennials that have entered the workforce or been in the workforce for a number of years, but they're not representative of leadership or at the highest level of sort of decision making. But they slowly are trickling into that, and they are entering that sphere, and that's when change will come about. The issue is with sort of climate change and all these pieces, we as humans, I think it's probably just part of our DNA and the way we've evolved. We're great at immediate threats, something that is immediate right in front of us. We can deal with it. Going back to our caveman ancestors, if there was like a predator, a lion in front of you, you'd have to run, fight or flight. But something that's much more longer term, and an issue that builds over time, slowly, like a drip of a tap. We're really bad at identifying that. So, especially in the Punjabi community, you're looking at sort of some of the health-related issues that we have, diabetes, heart issues, which sometimes can be pinned down to our diet, right? All those laddus and fried foods and all that kind of stuff we're eating, which we think, one off here is fine, then another one off there is okay. It's this wedding event here, it's there, and it kind of slowly builds up until you're faced with that threat, and then you're kind of like, what can I do to fix it? And all these scenarios are different, but generally it's kind of like, well, you should have changed your lifestyle a lot sooner and a lot earlier. And this climate change is similar to that in the sense that we're only now starting to see some of the impacts, and people are starting to really realize, what we're doing to the world and planet around us. And this COVID-19 is linked to that indirectly, right? It's about us encroaching on our natural environment. It's about us operating in ways where we have these wet markets where animals that have never been in close contact with each other now are in close contact, and all these viruses are mutating as a result. And it's the way we live, it's our economic, it's our social system which has caused this, and people are starting to realize we need to change that if we're going to think about our long-term survival, and also the fact that if we want our environment around us to thrive and not be polluted or damaged for the long term.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, it's very interesting, talking about people like Greta and other young activists. it's the moment they make a mistake or they say something which is slightly off the mark or slightly uneducated, because you've got to remember, I know you do, that they're young. And I remember when I was young, I used to talk loads of nonsense, and sometimes I'll say something stupid and regret it. I mean, you've got to give them slight benefit of the doubt. Their overall message is fantastic, but obviously they're going to make mistakes. But it seems like the media, certain sections of the media, will just pile on them then. Oh, look, she said this and she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's going to make mistakes. She's young, but I think she's made a great start. But I like her, man. I look up to someone like that, and I think she's a fantastic role model for my kids when they're old enough to understand what she means and what she's talking about. I think it's great. And, times can change, and you're right, about health. The Punjabi community is a great example, actually, because there is a point, though, where it's maybe too late to reverse your health and you're on medication, and, it may be too late to try and it's never too late to get healthy, but, you may have crossed that line, where you could have resolved it yourself. But now you have to see doctors, you're on hospital trips, and you're on medication. But yeah, so basically what you're saying is humans are slightly slow on the uptake.
When it comes to these long-term issues, yeah. So climate change is one of those, but I'm hoping this kind of scenario and situation has changed people's views. You can see it all around us, but I hope it changes people's views for the long term. So once we get out of this, and we will get out of this situation, we will be back to normal functioning society. Will people remember this time and take those lessons learned to actually change the way they live, change the way they consume, be more considerate about nature, maybe spend more time with their family, all those things that people are starting to experience during lockdown. And you got to remember, we being, I say we as in us in a sort of developed nation, we are very privileged that actually this crisis, this global pandemic for a lot of people just means staying indoors, right? It means staying indoors, doing your job, having a roof over your head, still spending time with family, having food on the table. And that's not the case for a large percentage of the world around us. So I hope people realize that and count their blessings in terms of those important things in life, which, when the hustle and bustle starts again, can quickly and quite easily be forgotten.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I did an interview a few weeks back with someone, and we spoke about that, and we was quite cynical, both of us, and we said, I think people are going to forget this time next year. People have a very short memory about how things were, and so let's hope not. Let's try and stay positive. But so things are going to change. I mean, in regards to the environment, you could see just by humans traveling less within a few weeks, people in India could see the Himalayas. There were animals in villages encroaching into the town.
There were even deers in East London in some roads.
Brave deers to be walking around East London.
There were, yeah.
But exactly. So we live side by side with wildlife. We have to come to terms with that, and I think that egotistical nature of humans, which has always been there, is prevalent now. You can see it. But I hope, we could reverse all that good work we've done just by staying in regards to the environment. We could ruin that within a couple of weeks by coming back out. But I think on the business front, I think businesses have learned that a lot of their staff, I'm not talking all sectors, can work from home, and it's doable. And I think especially working from home could be a big shift for the majority of people. I've been working from home. It's doable. I can do my job, and it saves me the commute, the 2-hour commute back and forth where I'm working. And I think businesses, obviously, once they do start opening offices, may think, well, if you're safe to work from home and you can work from home, continue, because it's probably more dangerous going into an office. Businesses are thinking about liability. If they do catch COVID-19, they've got to put security measures in, safety measures as well. So how do you think the sort of structure of working from home could become the norm?
Well, I was going to ask you a question, actually, to say, before I answer that question, would you once we get back to sense of normality, we can, social distancing isn't in place, would you prefer to work from home or would you prefer to work from an office?
It's a good question, because when I first started working from home, I didn't enjoy it. You had that initial first few days where you're thinking it's quite novel. I'm at home, but when I have worked at home in the past, it's been on my own terms. I wanted to work from home. I needed to do something. But when you're kind of forced, after a while, the social interaction with team members and even just the commute, it sort of changed my psyche, because I used to enjoy the commute in a strange way, because I used to listen to podcasts and read a book. That was my quiet time, and I didn't really get that at home. But now I've settled in. I've got a kind of place where I work. I spend more time with my family, because I can shut off quicker, and I haven't got that long trip home. I can have a little break midday if I need to go out to the shops to get some pasta and toilet roll. So I think I've adapted, and humans adapt so quickly as well. And I think now it's going to be quite odd or difficult for me going back into the office. So I, for one, I'm enjoying it now.
Just what you said there, similar for a lot of people, and businesses have realized that. So there are some industries, right, where working from home was generally the norm, so they're really good at it and there's all the benefits. But there's so many other industries and so many business leaders that thought, if you're working from home, you're not really working. You might be taking half a day off, doing something else. We can't watch you. We can't manage the work that you're doing. That says a lot about sort of certain industries where there's that lack of that trust of their sort of employees and their teams. And obviously some industries you've got to be physical, but in those industries where it's remote, I think businesses that thought like that obviously had no choice in this circumstance. I had to adapt, and so many of them started to realize actually this works, and there's so many commercial benefits for them, right? And this is a really important piece. So if you've got a large majority of your employees working virtually, you don't necessarily need a huge office. So there's a cost there that can be reduced, number one. Number two, as you said, people have a lot more time, so all of a sudden they generally are more productive, and early studies are showing that people are becoming more productive when they're working virtually or working remotely. Therefore, all of a sudden, through just allowing this flexibility, productivity has increased. And then there's also this huge piece on well-being, right? You get more time to spend with your family, more time to spend at home. You cut down that 2-hour commute, so all of a sudden you could go to the gym instead, go for a walk, or have a lie-in, or whatever it is that you want to do, but your well-being increases as a result of it. So all of these commercial benefits for businesses by just allowing their employees to work from home. And there are challenges and downsides to working remotely, trying to keep that physical connection, trying to keep that social connection with teams, etc. But I think there's a balance to be struck. But definitely, I think this is going to mean a fundamental change for a lot of industries, especially those that thought remote working wasn't an option. They very quickly realised that it is an option.
I don't know about you, but working from home, I've worked so much more. I think because I'm at home and my laptop's there, and I probably did too much, because I was even having lunch, my laptop still be open, and I wasn't having that proper break that I would have done in the office, where I would have gone out maybe to get something to eat. So I've had to put some slight barriers at home, and to make it work, to say when I'm having lunch, I'm having lunch, so I turn the laptop off, have lunch, and when I finish, I'm logged off. And I don't log on until in the morning. But you're right, that traveling to and fro the office, obviously I said I missed it in the early days, but you find other things, and it is about having I feel a lot calmer. I don't, then that, trying to get up early, and rushing to get the train or the bus, and getting home, and it could be delays on as on the trains.
Yeah.
Right, and also
I've forgotten what that feels like. Those delays on the train when you're standing there and it's like everything's cancelled or it's delayed by half an hour, and you're just like, there's more and more people piling into the station right now. Like, am I even going to get on the train? And it's I've totally forgotten what that feels like.
Yeah, I mean, and even especially for yourself, you're down south, so within the London area, the cost of travel, you're saving that money. commuting. It's going to be a fundamental change, and I think it's going to be a good thing, because if less people are traveling to work, there's less pollution. Again, the environment thing comes up again, and again, offices won't need to be open. These big businesses won't need to have these massive buildings, with their lights on and their air conditioning on, and but there's always a knock-on effect. It can affect staff, I suppose, that need to be working in them offices. Security guards, people that clean the offices. There's always, but I think there's a balance, and at some point it will all settle down. But me and you are probably in a fortunate position. We can work from home. A lot of people can't, but I think especially office-based staff and them industries, and I think that's going to change. I mean, things like this Zoom and Skype calls. It could be the fact, you go into the office once a week to meet team members, because I think you need that sort of physical contact almost, of seeing them.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to say that, because the business that I run at the moment, we've been discussing it quite recently. We think actually a model of like 3 days working from home and 2 days in the office, 3 and 2, or maybe even 4 and 1 might work. So we're already planning ahead, thinking, okay, when we do go back to the office, how could we structure it in a way that works for everyone, and that makes sure that we still have this sense of sort of personal balance in our lives, in terms of spending time with family and doing the things that we enjoy, and not getting stuck on a train and being annoyed by the fact that we're packed in like sardines, or the train's been delayed by half an hour, whatever those kind of situations are.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one reason to work from home, it's just the trains, at least. I mean, they're a complete nightmare. It's so bad, that's why I moved up north.
That's serious.
It's serious, yeah. You know how bad it is, but so it's these kind of shifts in our social cohesion, and how we're going to change. And but as humans, we need to have contacts with other humans. I think that's just the way we're built. And I don't know if Zoom and these Skype calls quite has the same effect on us. It may do, but then we may have a generation, talking of millennials, who are just used to talking to their friends on a screen. And
I would say not even millennials. I think we are more digitally native, as it's called, but Gen Z, the generation below us, I think they're the ones that are, way more plugged in, way more connected online, used to the fact that, having these kind of video conferences and all these facilities is just more of the norm. Watching TV has always been on demand for them, or has been via YouTube. The idea of satellite TV or terrestrial TV is kind of like, that's a generation ago. Just like how we look at VHS tapes now, they look at that in a similar way. So it's really interesting to look at that generation below us that are coming through, that for them, that's always been the norm. But also for that generation, this whole circumstance of COVID-19 is really interesting. People aren't talking about it yet, but I think the long-term impacts we'll start to see, and we'll always be talking about them over the next decade, is around how has this impacted young children, like living through this. And I know initially it's probably like, well, hey, schools are, school for a month. And then it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so we're staying at home, and, a month's gone by, then it's become 2 months. And, that's longer than most schools' sort of summer holidays, right? And it's starting to become the norm. And that will fundamentally shift their view of the world, their view on these topics like climate change, and their view on actually working as well, right? They will see their parents probably, for the most part, working from home. They would have, all those kids who have parents who are working in certain sectors like, health, NHS, all of those sort of frontline workers, right? And seeing how important those are. I know historically people have looked down on those kind of jobs, right? And all of a sudden, we as society have realised they're some of the most important and valuable people that contribute to society, and they've never been reflected in that way. And now all of a sudden you're seeing kids saying, you know what, I want to
I want to become a nurse. I want to become a doctor. I want to, become a train driver. I want to do this, want to do that, because they see that sense of pride in doing that job and how it supports the functioning, the right functioning of society, right? So I think, we won't see those impacts for a long time yet, but I think they will be huge.
I think definitely that's a great point about key workers. I think when the term key worker was bandied about, a lot of people assumed, obviously rightly, that at the NHS, doctors, but actually key workers, it also meant bus drivers, delivery drivers, postmen. There's loads. Supermarket workers, in a sense, became key workers. We need them open, we need them working, so we can eat and go get our food. And I think it just showed to people that these key workers are the ones that keep our country running and ticking over. It potentially isn't them people in the offices typing away on computers, like me and you, right? But so you're right, and it could change people's attitudes, younger people's attitudes, to say, look, you know what, I want to become a key worker because it's important. It's an important job. And I think that's a great thing that we finally realised. It's terrible that it took a global pandemic for us to realise this. But, and I know we're clapping for the NHS, and I'm not sure if that's stopping now. The lady who started it, because considering, look, we've done it for 11 weeks.
From where we are.
Yeah. But, after a while you think, I know you're clapping for the NHS and it's great, but how about we just pay them a little bit more?
Exactly that. So let's go from these token gestures, right, which are very important. They give up that sense of solidarity, but actually, put that money where our mouth is, right, to make sure that, when it comes to having that voice, when it comes to this decision making, when it comes to voting, that we actually do turn up for them, because that's when it will matter. That's when we hold our MPs and our government to account, to say, well, this is how they supported us during this difficult time. What are we doing to make sure that they have a suitable living wage, that the certain working standards are adhered to, that their well-being is being considered as well, because that's how you show your support. That's how you show your appreciation, by being able to invest into those industries, to be able to support those individuals with the right kind of working environment, the right salary, so that they can also thrive. So that's where I'm really keen to make sure that over the next few years, that we as society keep on doing that, and we don't forget that. Yeah,
let's not let the people in power forget. And I think it is each of our responsibilities to, and when you talk about businesses as well, we should also remember the businesses that did a lot to help. And rather than some of these conglomerates, these massive companies, that actually, in a sense, took advantage of the situation, and I think these kind of scenarios in the world, pandemics, wars, or hunger and starvation, that's when you see the real mettle of some companies, what they're really in it for. Is it pure profits and money, or is it some kind of altruistic motive to do better in the world,
And it's exactly that piece, right? And it's kind of saying, look, if you want to do something, if you want to make sure businesses are doing the right thing, you've got to, vote with your wallet, right? You've got to make sure those businesses that have been supporting, have had the right motives around, the society around them, make sure you support them, right? And if you do find businesses that you don't fundamentally agree with their practices, the ethical piece around how they operate, then, don't buy their products, don't support them. That's the way you can highlight what matters to you. And then, over time, businesses will start to realize, and that's how you drive that change. That's how you drive that positive change.
Oh, absolutely. It's the only way. If they're affected by their returns, that's when they'll change. If you remember back, you're a lot younger than me, but I remember when McDonald's had a lot of pressure on them because of the food and the ingredients they had. Super Size Me documentary came out, and there was a lot of pressure on them. And what McDonald's did, which, I mean, as a company the size of McDonald's, did fantastically well, I would say, is change their menu and started putting more healthy options on, but also changing their branding to be more inclusive to different types of meals, and to be transparent and open to say, look, this is what goes in our foods. And it worked for them. You know, I'm sure their profits went up, but they had that point where they were wobbling a little bit, and it was only because consumers thought, I'm not eating that nonsense because I don't know what's in it. And that's when they changed. So if a company like McDonald's can change, you can literally change a company.
Another example, a really good example, if anyone's really interested in how businesses are being more socially aware, is like Unilever. So Paul Polman, who was a CEO a couple of years back now, when he joined, and he had this ambitious plan of saying, look, we are going to make sure we're much more sustainable in everything that we do, all of our supply chains, all of the products. So Unilever owns such a huge number of brands all around, household brands all around the world, right? And they said we are committed to being more sustainable and thinking about our planet around us and our employees and our consumers. And when you first announced that, you know, the stock price of Unilever took a massive hit. Investors were like, where has this come from, right? But actually, if we look at it now, and long term, you know, the share price of Unilever, its value has gone up tremendously, and they're seen as like one of the leaders around actually thinking about sustainability, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, aligning their practices to that, and what they've been doing across the supply chain. So, like, one of these ingredients, palm oil, is used in so many products you wouldn't believe it, right? And you know, that is an agricultural item, right? And they made sure that actually the supply chains, that the way palm oil was sourced, the way it was farmed, the people who farmed them, they were educated, it was done in a sustainable way, that they're not degrading the soil around them, etc. And all these things to really promote that. And that was, you know, huge amounts of investment and money they put in, which, you know, wasn't, as was part of their business models. They actually really believe in this long-term piece. We're investing in our long-term sustainability of our business. So for anyone who's listening is interested in that Unilever are one of there's a few, but one really great case study to look at.
Yeah, I mean, and I know some oil companies, the big bad oil companies out there. I think some of them are sort of changing their approach as well. But the proof is in the pudding. Let's see how it all pans out. And, you know, kudos to Unilever. They are massive, and I'm sure a lot of people out there will be surprised to see how many products they do make. It's quite, it's amazing. But sometimes you think we've got to be careful when these companies, you know, like Unilever and McDonald's and Coca-Cola, they become so big and they start infringing in culture. And when I used to, when I started reading about branding, I've always been interested in branding. And things, people like Coca-Cola the company would put in Coke machines into schools, and the Coke was free. You know, kids didn't really need to pay, but they would just put them in, you know. But they were saying they were helping out the schools, and, you know, they'll obviously print books for the kids and pencils and pens and, you know, equipment that they needed. But what I realised, what they were doing is prepping these young kids to become their future consumers. And part of me thought, that's quite a twisted, evil, genius thing to do. You know, to get them hooked early, you know. So I'm always wary about how big these companies get and how much power they hold. And, you know, sponsoring the Olympics like McDonald's can give the impression to some people, McDonald's is fine, it's healthy, sponsors the Olympics, they're athletes, so it must be good, you know. So I'm always wary about that. But it all comes to communication, I suppose, from these companies. I mean, you're into economics, you look at these things, and, you know, you would know about Unilever, but I think probably the person on the street probably won't know. But so what do you think as a business, how should they be getting their message out there?
So in terms of the obviously that, you know, the branding strategies and tactics have changed massively over the years. I mean, I think I was those kind of examples were before my time, but you know, you hear about them, you see the case studies, the tobacco industry, this, you know, a lot of similar sort of things, you know, which, you know, raise a lot of ethical questions, right? But I think right now for a lot of businesses, it's really about communicating their social credentials. So I know there is what people call greenwashing. So they're just marketing it, but they're not actually living it. But that's how, you know, if you, as a consumer, you really want to get to the bottom of it, is really understanding the business. You know, I know it seems like a little bit of work at times, but just understanding, you know, what their reporting is on social metrics, social impact. So the whole industry around measuring social impact has grown now in terms of people want to understand, okay, how does this business operate? How are they, you know, how are they sustainably minded? You know, how are they measuring it? How are they improving year on year? So they're saying it, but actually, are they improving over time? And are they actually taking this seriously as part of their business? So it does take some research, to be honest with you. I mean, some businesses have started to really focus on their marketing. So no doubt, you know, when you see certain industries like, you know, ethical clothing brands, you're looking at, you know, recycled products, you know, a lot of people upcycling, etc. So I personally think as a result of COVID-19, that will just accelerate, right? So many people have started to change their consumption habits. I don't know about you, me being in lockdown, obviously not being out, not traveling as much, my spending and my consumption has gone way down. Obviously, I'm ordering from online stores a lot more. You know, Amazon, I'm using a lot more than I used to, let's put it that way. But I'm also being really conscious about what I buy, thinking, well, is it of use? If I'm replacing something that's broken, can I repair it first before just, you know, blindly just going to buy it, right? And then the products I do buy now, as I become, I say, you know, more of an educated consumer, I will, before I purchase something, I'll look at the business and say, well, actually, you know, do their values align with mine? Because that's the only way organizations will start to really change. And another way that you can make a huge impact, and everyone can do this, right? So, you know, a lot of people in the UK, you all have pensions, right? To make sure that, you know, in your pension, are you invested in sustainable funds? You know, funds that, you know, might not be linked to certain industries that you don't agree with, you know, tobacco, for example, you know, defense, etc., and businesses that are, you know, more sustainably minded, because all of a sudden, you know, pension funds form up a large chunk, when it all added up together, of business ownership. So they're as institutional investors. And so if everyone starts changing their allocation of, actually, we're going to be, you know, moving more towards sustainable funds or sustainable businesses, then all of a sudden businesses will start to see that, right? Over time, they'll start to see those shifts in terms of what investors are looking for. And that creates a huge impact. And so through all these indirect ways, each and every individual can make a much more positive impact towards sort of, you know, having a more sustainable and a more sustainable world, right, through influencing these businesses.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you're right. My consuming habits have changed. I don't think I've had a takeaway since the lockdown began. I'm eating a lot more.
I drove past a McDonald's a week or two back, like a drive-through. I just couldn't believe, like, the queue around the block. And I was like, are people really going to wait that long, right, to get like their Big Mac fix or whatever they're getting, right? Like, it's interesting.
Yes, they are.
They are obviously. But I really enjoy the fact that I spent a lot of time being at home, learning to cook more, you know, more cuisine, different dishes, experimenting, and really enjoying good food. And I've even taken up sort of growing vegetables. I know in a lot of Asian households, especially the Sikh community, you know, our ancestry is in farming for a lot of people. But, you know, I couldn't grow anything. I didn't have to grow anything until, you know, lockdown started, and I thought to myself, you know what, I want to learn this, because it's a useful skill to have, right?
Yeah, I did see one of your videos or posts, and I think you put the shoots in the wrong way, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. So that was one example, but I thought, you know, let's share it, because this is all part of the learning process. I think we planted some runner beans, and I'd sowed the seeds the wrong way around, and then a few weeks later, BB came up. I was like, this is why it's not coming up, because here you go, you planted it upside down, and it was like, okay, I've learnt my lesson. So we had a few mishaps on the way, but that's all part of the process, right? Learning and improving and getting better every single time.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're a few steps ahead of me, at least. At least you've tried, and you're right. And for me as well, in my Punjabi community, all my family back home are farmers. So they would be the same with me. But yeah, so things will change. I think maybe people will start growing more things at home if they can. So sometimes we've got to remember, not everyone has that luxury of having a garden. How is gardens become a luxury? You don't realize these things. I've got a garden, kids playing there, and I don't think twice about it. But then when we're talking about lockdowns, I was thinking some of these inner cities in London and these other and Manchester, Birmingham, when they're in high rises, they've got 3 rooms and they're stuck at home. Mentally for them, it must be very difficult. So I'm kind of glad some of the lockdown measures have been decreased.
Got a feature from behind the net over there. You're walking through the room.
Cameo.
Cameo. Yeah. It's like those Marvel movies, right? When you get Stan Lee walking in the background somewhere.
Yeah. She has to appear on every interview we do now.
Yeah, that's going to be the thing. Sorry, I've totally derailed your thought process.
That's fine. Yeah, so, I think things will change, attitudes will change, and I hope for the better. I really do indeed. But, I am cynical. I do think...
You've got to be the optimist, mate. You've got to be the optimist.
I am an optimist. My kids are optimists. Everything's fantastic for them, But I've been around a while, and I look at history and how we never bloody learn about, that wars don't actually solve anything. Talking probably helps, but I don't know. So let's be positive. I'm going to be positive, at least on this call with you. So I know just before this call, I was messaging you saying, are you ready? And you was on a call with Carl Slade. I know you do a lot of work with them. And probably at this time, it must be absolutely excruciatingly hard to be giving aid to these countries and all the countries that Carl Slade is. It must have been logistically a nightmare at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm no longer a trustee with them, but still volunteer and support where I can. I haven't, to be honest, done much around COVID, just because I've got 2 vulnerable people at home, high risk people at home, so it's been a bit of a challenge. But we've been watching what KA is doing, what other fantastic charities are doing as well. And I think we talked about businesses, right? So if you talk about charities as a whole, their operations have been massively impacted. So if you're an international aid agency, you can no longer have your teams flying around the world, or you may be relying on your partners that are already in different demographics, different countries, or you may have employees stuck out somewhere, right? And then it's a case of coordinating. How do you deliver aid in an environment where social distancing is required? How do you deliver aid in an environment where PPE equipment and food supplies are, there's huge shortages, supplies are sort of hiking prices, etc. For example, refugee camps, all around the world. This topic hasn't been picked up yet, but it's one that's very close to my heart. I've been to a number of refugee camps around the world, and can you imagine, how prevalent, the spread of COVID-19 in those places would be, the lack of medical resources already in normal circumstances, let alone a global pandemic. And what they must be going through right now. So a lot of, international aid agencies, it's unfortunate their international operations have been impacted, but to a large degree. And then also organizations that are working or operating in the UK, for example, are reshifting and refocusing to support the pandemic efforts. Something that, a lot of, you speak to a lot of charity leaders, they say, we never thought that actually, if we were operating in a disaster environment, we operate in developing countries around the world. We never thought that, we'd have to deploy a complete and full team in the UK to support people as well. So it's quite interesting and quite a challenging and crazy environment charities find themselves in to make sure that they can continue supporting people, and also think about, how can they, raise funds to continue doing that, right? So if you think about most charities, fundraisers are through sporting events, physical activities, dinners, galas, auctions, and all that kind of stuff. A lot of it is moving online, but there's no denying it's impacted the way, they operate. And so actually they're reliant on people's generosity and support now more than ever before.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Things like charity events, you're right, sporting events, football tournaments, and things like that, even charity concerts and shows. I think there is going to be a massive shift for a lot of these events, not just for charity, going online now. We're going to start seeing, I've seen a few live performances of singers. That could be the way forward. You could have to buy a ticket online.
You have to buy a ticket for the Instagram Live, right?
Yeah, with me, I'm a bit like you. I'm always about on demand, because with Instagram Live, you have to be there at the time when it goes live, obviously. And I'm not always. I'd love to see some more lives, but I'm always doing things at that particular time, So I prefer on demand, obviously, like a podcast, right? But I think that's the way we're shifting. We watch TV like that on demand, so it's a shame. But it could be that we get a particular live show where you buy a ticket. It's at 8 p.m. Like a big band or a singer, and I think I would give that a go. In the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. I prefer video on demand, but for something that I'm really interested in, or an artist or individual, whoever it is I'm particularly following, I'll be really happy to go to a live event, because you get that feeling of, there's a community there, right? There's people that share that same that same interest in whatever it is that they're attending together, right? And so, don't get me wrong, it being digital, it's going to be slightly different to being physical, but it's still that same feeling of actually we're all tuning in. There's a large group of people all around the world that are tuning in to do this. So an example that I give is a tour and coach of mine, is quite a senior individual in the business world, and has a stutter, right? So he is part of a large organization that supports people with a stutter and other sort of invisible disabilities, as I like to call them. But what they've been doing with some sessions is having live yoga sessions in the morning. So there's, in some of these sessions, they've had literally thousands of people all around the world joining this live yoga session. They all share the common issue around having a stutter, etc., but they do a yoga session together and then they talk about it. And it's like, wow, you can do this from the comfort of your own living room, right? In the morning, you've got all these people with shared values doing something together, and then just having the discussion. So you've got someone from America, London, Europe somewhere, Africa, all around the world. They're all logging in at different times. So it's morning for someone, late night for someone else, mid-afternoon for someone else, but they're all getting together just to experience something together, do something together, which, is an amazing thing. And there's amazing use of technology that people are using it for.
Yeah, I think that is going to be the future, because a lot of artists, especially the way the music industry is now, specifically, there's not much money made from record sales or streaming on Spotify. And where they made their money was live performances. So it could be a way that artists could use that, if they sold tickets, £5, £10, whatever it is, and you get entrance into a locked room virtually, you can watch the show. I think that'd be fantastic. You're right. If you get like-minded people, and it's limited to 500 people, say, just to save the bandwidth, I think that could work. And not just for singers, it could be, spoken word artists. It could be for DJs. I understand, it's difficult. We will miss that feeling of being with other people in a concert or event. But I think, certain singers, it will definitely work. Ghazal singers, qawwalis, I can imagine just watching them, and I would pay if at that particular time. I think there's going to be a lot of industries that are going to change. But I think the trend will be, as it's always been, we're going to be moving more online now, and we're going to find ways of using online tools like Zoom and this to share our content. I think this is the first step, and we were heading that way anyway, but we've been pushed due to COVID-19 to utilize it. And to be honest, there's so many talented people out there. They pick up these tools so quickly, and they put them out. And I look at them, and they're usually a lot younger than me, and I think, wow, that's amazing. How have you done that? So the future's definitely brighter and positive, and I think it will see a lot more artists coming out now, because the audience is out there and they're wanting to consume. So I think we'll see some new types of artists coming out.
Yeah, but I completely agree with you. I think one thing for anyone who's watching this, especially, even if it's artists or the creative industry, or even broadly, right, during any period of significant disruptions, when you look at the last great financial crisis in 07, 08, during any period of significant disruption, it's given rise to so many opportunities because the structure of the system has shifted slightly, and all of a sudden, people are open to new ideas or trying new things. So for anyone who's actually listening, who's thinking about it, I would say go ahead and do it, because now is one of the best times to test that. No doubt, don't get me wrong, there's a big human cost, and we are trying to, battle this pandemic, but there are, positive things that you can be doing. There's such great opportunities. And I think, we talk about the creative industries around performing online, engaging more with the audience online is such a fantastic opportunity that, especially young and upcoming emerging artists, I would say definitely grab it. Grab that opportunity. Don't think you have to wait or you might not be good enough, because that's that limiting mindset. You can do it, and there's nothing wrong with failure. And I think it's one thing a period of disruption also allows with people to be happy with failure, because it's kind of like, oh well, I tried, it didn't work out because it was because of this external factor. They don't realize that they're just allowing themselves to say, what, failure is okay. At least I tried first, and I went for it. I tried a new opportunity. I tested it. It worked fantastic. It didn't work, and I changed it and I tweaked it and I learned from the feedback, and then I put it out again and then it worked. That's the kind of mentality you kind of need to have, that scrappy startup mentality, as I like to call it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, absolutely right. Yeah, I think everyone listening should never live life with regret. I mean, for me personally, I never wanted to be that old person sitting in the pub saying, oh yeah, I could have been a contender, I could have done something. I had this great idea, but I never, went through with it. So for anyone listening, I would definitely just give it a go, without a doubt. You're absolutely right. We have the tools.
Let's be honest. No one likes that guy, right? I've seen many of those guys, or girls as well, women as well, who say, I could have done this, but I just didn't do it. I could have done that, and it's like, you should have just done it. Just gone ahead and given it a go. At least I would have liked to hear, no, I tried it. I gave it my best. It didn't work out for X, Y, Z reason. At least I gave it a go. To me, I always respect those people. I think, at least they lived life with no regrets, right? They saw an opportunity. They tried to action upon it. They were successful or they weren't successful, doesn't really matter, but at least they took that action, which is always the most important thing.
Yeah. You may be surprised, Indy. I used to be that guy literally in the bar, drinking.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about this, actually. We have, yeah, I remember.
I used to like a drink, but I was a different person then, but I used to be that guy saying, I used to tell people I'm going to start a podcast. Sitting at the pub.
You did it.
Then, and eventually I stopped drinking. That was the key factor. And then I started. But, I used to be that guy. So now I'm just telling people with experience, don't be that person. You're going to regret that, definitely. There's more to life than, consuming alcohol or drugs or whatever. That's not real life. Use the tools available. Use the time that you potentially have at the moment. Greater time as any to do it. And Indy, I don't know how it's happened, but you've made me very positive. I started off quite cynical and pessimistic about the world, and now I think I've changed within 40 minutes. Speaking.
I'm glad I've influenced you in that way, but you got to be positive, right? Because I don't know, if I speak to certain business leaders, right, or even speak to people as a whole, but I recall one really, really profound conversation. The first week of lockdown, right, and he was like, we've got to, we've got to change our ways in our business, because if someone asked me the question, is it the case of my business or my grandchildren? I'm always going to choose my grandchildren. I'm always going to make sure I can do what I can to make sure the world's a better place. And that's not a cliche thing to say. That's individual change that leads to collective change, right? And so the more and more people start thinking positively, that slowly permeates throughout the world, and that creates a positive impact. And that's that's what you have to do, right? I'm sure if you're thinking about your kids, you want the world to be in a good place for them, for when they grow up and when they have their families or pursue their careers or whatever they're doing, that actually they have the ability to do that. And it's not the case that our generation thought, no, we're not gonna think about the future, and we'll just live for the moment, because that's not the right way to be thinking.
No. So Indy, look, coming towards the end, I just wanted to ask you, I've been asking people that have come on the podcast, what's your plans for when this lockdown is over and when we can travel on planes? I know you like your travelling. I know you both do. So what's the plans for yourself once this is all back to normal? Are you going to be travelling to another country? What would be your dream destination?
So we've got on our bucket list, as soon as sort of social distancing is over behind us and we can travel to Gurdwara, because it's been a long time, and me and Jasper both, that's the first place we're going to. As soon as we do that, after that we're going to Disneyland. So I was meant to go to Disneyland in December of last year, end of 2019. I actually broke my foot like 2 weeks before. I was so stoked to go to Disneyland. I booked like the hotel inside like the main theme park. I was like, I'm going to go all the rides. I'm not going to be queuing up for anything. And then that happened. And we thought to ourselves, you know what, we'll go in summer. And obviously this has happened now. So we were both like, that is going to happen. We're going to release our inner child sort of within us, and go crazy on all the rides. Those are the two things.
Where was the first place? You slightly cut out. What was the first place?
So the first place I want to go to was Gurdwara. I want to go to the Gurdwara. It's been a very long time for both of us. It's that sense of peace and solace going to the Gurdwara. So that's number one for us.
Right, and then Disney. You know what? I actually had tickets booked for Disneyland Paris in March, and I had built it up with the kids. Said we're going to, and I had to tell them that we can't go, and then I had to explain what COVID-19 was, which was a terrible evening in our household.
You're gonna have to make it up to them.
I'm going to make it up to them, but indeed, it's been fantastic catching up with you. I hope you enjoyed it. We persevered, didn't we? We got there in the end. We had a few technical issues, but we got there in the end. This is the way life is now.
That's it, right? You persevere through it. You were resilient, but I absolutely enjoyed it, Sat. I'm so glad to be back on the show again. It's been quite some time, and really glad to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, like I said, I'm not lying. I feel really positive now. I feel like I need to be doing something a lot more with my life. I was a little bit down, I think, when I started this conversation, a little bit pessimistic about the world and how we're going to move ahead in the future. But I'm feeling good now, so I just want to thank you for that personally. But for anyone listening, is there somewhere they can catch up with any of your posts or website?
Yeah, sure. So if you search for @Indy Hothi, INDYHOTHI, so Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. On LinkedIn, I've been writing quite a few posts recently around businesses on the front line, what they're doing, the impact of COVID-19. So if anyone's interested in that, you can find all those articles there. Fantastic. You're not on TikTok? I'm on TikTok, actually. We made one video during lockdown. It's kind of like this video game style of video. We made one bank holiday weekend when we were bored. So that's the kind of stuff we do. Yes, when you choose your avatar. Choose your avatar, choose your character. We both love sort of fighting games. I grew up playing Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and me and Jasper thought, why not make a video of that? So you can watch the video and decide if you choose player 1 or player 2. What player number was you? I was player 2, unfortunately. I've learned a few things in my life, and that's one of those. You've got to keep the wife happy. Well done. Yeah, we will always be 2. I'm happy with that. We're happy. Yeah, of course we're happy. Yeah. But thank you indeed. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you. We'll have to do it again at some point and see what's happening in the world. And thank you. Thank you, Sat. It's been a pleasure. All right. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.